Maximize Business Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. Today, our guest is Esther Pipoly. She's the founder of Loss of Life Advocates, LLC, based in San Antonio, Texas. Loss of Life Advocates, or LOLA, provides confidential concierge grief support and guidance for individuals, families, and business owners. They also help organizations manage grief in the workplace. Now, Esther was introduced to me by a mutual acquaintance after I was a guest speaker at his Vistage group. And after speaking with her, I was compelled to invite Esther on the podcast to talk about the importance of being prepared for tragedy. You know, by definition, accidents are accidents, right? Nobody expects those things to happen. So today we're going to talk about being prepared for that. Welcome to Maximize Business Value, Esther. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled to have you on. And this is going to be a little bit of a tough subject, I think, for folks to listen to today. But tell us about Lola.
Well, first of all, Lola is my mother. That's her name. And it just so happened to be that when the branding people were going through, what are we going to name the company? And they, of course, go through, what are important people in your life? Who was influential? I thought, well, my mom was always the woman behind the man. She took care of my dad and our family. She had a PhD from UT Austin, was a professor up there. But she was my first loss. And my mom was a strong woman. And so I thought, what better way to honor her than to name my company after her? But Loss of Life Advocates in Lola was created in 2017 after suffering through some personal losses in 2014. So you kind of have to go back to go forward. But Loss of Life Advocates, we help people before, during, and after a loss. And based off of my own personal experiences of losing my dad and my husband 63 days apart, I realized that after having 20 plus years in insurance and benefits and helping employers and employees, that there were a lot of missing things. There are a lot of gaps in that processes of benefits, and especially for business owners, like how to talk to people, how to talk to their employees when there's going to be a loss, when they know that an employee is going through that transitional period with parents and maybe a spouse that's been diagnosed with cancer. So I actually created Lola after going through all these experiences and realizing that there was so much that people needed to learn about how to get themselves prepared, and then how to reach out for help from a consultation standpoint to get through all the stuff that comes after losing a loved one that maybe is a business owner, or it's a key employee, or anybody like that. So family members especially. So that's what Lola is. We don't not do anything. I have to say, a kind of weird way to say that, but there's no ask that is too big or small. We get people that ask us to walk cemeteries for them. We have business owners that call us and say, can you help me assign my life insurance policy for my wife's, funeral arrangements? Can you go there? I don't want to be in person. Can you do 90% of it so I don't have to walk in to the funeral home? So we do a variety of services from very, very big things to very, very little things.
Wow. There is such a need for this. You mentioned you work before, during, and after, but I'm going to guess that the majority of your clients, I wouldn't be knowledgeable enough to assign a percentage to it, but I'll bet a majority of your clients you're picking up either during or after, that you don't get a lot that are before, because we're just not wired that way. We're not wired to think about those things unless there's a situation where there is already an expectation. For example, somebody has, stage 4 terminal cancer, and then they need to think about and plan for those things. But I'm guessing that you get a lot of calls, kind of the morning after calls. Am I right on that?
Yeah, or I get the calls from a hospital. And these are the sad ones, right? Where dad owns a business. They have a will, but it's been years since they've updated it. He doesn't have a legacy plan in place, and he's still conscious enough before they send him home into hospice, or into whatever's going to happen for in transitional terms. But they reach out and say, can you help us with getting an attorney to help us do a bedside will, because we want to get this taken care of here before we go home. Or I get it right before, the hours before, hey, we don't have a power of attorney, we're having difficult times getting banking. I'm like, it just really depends on where dad is in this process. Is he still coherent? And then we get people, unfortunately, after the loss, and they're like, now what do I do? And most people, they have a plan, and they know to go to the bank, but they don't know if they go to the bank and they're not on the account, the banker says, I'm really sorry for your loss, and they freeze the accounts. And then have no longer access to funds. And so there are a lot of things that happen right after that we're scooping them up people and telling them, okay, well, we have to have a plan B. So plan A is getting prepared. Plan B is now we have to figure out, we're now, as my dad would say, looking down the barrel of the gun. What are we going to do now?
Wow. Your dad had a way with words for sure. So
a lot of gasms.
that's true. I grew up in the deep South. I've heard that term many times myself. So, well, let's back up. You touched on this briefly, but let's really get to kind of the root here of why you do this. What's your background, and why did you start LOLA? Kind of to borrow from Simon Sinek, what's your why?
Well, like I referred to earlier, had the double loss in 2014. I was in employee benefits. I was an account manager for 20 plus years. I was a broker for 1 year. I sold, and I have a lot of respect for brokers because I didn't like sales. Wasn't cut out from that cloth for me, but I like taking care of people and helping them. I'm a communicator. My degree is in communications from the University of Texas at San Antonio. And when my dad got sick, I knew it was going to happen. He knew it was going to happen. We had all the conversations. My dad was a businessman. He worked for Xerox Corporation for 30 plus years. He had his hands in nonprofit work. He was an economics professor. So him and I had all the discussions around what was going to happen at the end of his life. When he passed away and my husband got sick, again, I'm in benefits. My husband said he didn't feel good. And 10 days from the day my dad died, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And he died roughly 50 days later from diagnosis. And we did everything. And my benefits, the company I work for in downtown Denver, they were great. They had great benefits. They were giving me 1-800 numbers. They were helping me, guiding me and navigating me. However, I didn't have a person. So having gone through the double loss and then having to be an executor for 2 different estates, I realized that there was a lot of missing pieces that I needed somebody to help me. And I didn't need another checklist from a financial advisor or a bank. I didn't need another person saying, well, maybe you should do this. I needed somebody to sit down with me and say, okay, you've got this stack of paperwork. This is the first thing we need to do. If you're worried financially, if that's your biggest hurdle right now, let's get that taken care of. Let's try to figure out where you're at. Can you afford to stay home from work? So after going through all those questions and really needing to find somebody to help navigate, on top of all that, my husband's life insurance didn't pay. And so I realized that what my husband thought when he was dying was that, don't worry, you're going to have a little bit of time to get back on your feet. Life insurance should be prompt pay in Texas. You shouldn't have a problem. Unfortunately, he had taken out the policy within 2 years. And so the contestability clause of the policy came into effect. And it was about 6 months of research on their part, and then finally a decline. And so it took me 840 days to find a team, move back to Texas, move my family back, and find a new job, and just everything, right? Your whole life starts all over again when you're a widow. So went through all of that, and then 840 days later, from the day my husband passed away, we settled his estate, and I took what was left of that life insurance policy because I had to pay attorneys, and I decided that I needed to make something come out of this. That this was the only thing I had left of him. So I decided to invest in a new type of consultation business, which is LOLA. And that is really my why, because I had to shut down a business, my husband's law practice. I'm not a lawyer. I didn't know what to do. I made a lot of mistakes. So I knew walking business owners through that, or providing the service for their spouses and their teams afterwards, would be a helpful thing to do. based off of my own personal experience. And I went out, I got certified in a lot of different things because I didn't know everything, but my benefits background really played into me being able to be a solution person, because that's what account managers do. We're problem solvers. So being that problem solver really helped me with creating LOLA. And that is really my why. I don't want anybody to go through what I went through. I don't want to have to hear people say my husband's life insurance didn't get paid. And I occasionally run into people like that. And it's very difficult to gear them in the right direction and find them help. But that is really my why. Is I'm very passionate about making sure that people have the support that they need in the most vulnerable times and in the darkest moments.
840 days. Did they ultimately pay the life insurance claim?
Yes, we settled the claim, and of course, attorney's fees play into all that, and their fees and their hard cost, and so I felt like I was as made whole as I could with that process. But I will tell you that 840 days. When I talk to business owners or couples that are going through consultation to get prepared, I ask them, can your spouse afford to go 840 days without a life insurance policy helping them pay for their mortgage or the taxes or your kid's private school or the vehicles? And there were a lot of things that my husband, because he was a PLLC, had run through the business that I didn't realize that a credit union can cross collateralize from a business loan to personal loans. So our autos were being, confiscated. They were coming in and they were taking them after Christmas, right after he died. And I'd been making the car payments. And the banker told me, don't worry about it. Don't worry about his business loan. He had an equipment loan with a credit union. Don't worry about it. Just pay your car payments. That's separate. It'll go through probate. Well, a credit union is really the only banking institution, credit union, that can cross collateralize between a bank loan and your personal property. So they were coming out to take the cars and talk about being vulnerable. My husband, he would have never imagined that. But no, that was just a little thing that I learned during this process, that when I talk to business owners, I'm like, if you're going to have a credit union, then have your vehicles or whatever is personal in another bank account. Because take it from me, they will cross collateralize. When I got the phone call and I said, I'm making the payments, it doesn't matter. Your husband owed money on a bank loan.
Oh, my word. Holy cow. All right. So at this point, our listeners may be thinking, hey, Bronson, what does this have to do with maximizing business value? Look, this is a cautionary tale, right? This is something we talk a lot about business owners that will die behind their desk, right? That's their exit strategy. They die behind their desk and they kick the can down the street to their heirs, right? Their family. The real reason that I wanted Esther to come on here is to talk about some of these things that happen, because look, if you die behind your desk, these are the things that your spouse and your family are going to have to deal with if you're not fully prepared for that time. And so it will have everything in the world to do with the value of the business, because if the business is really dependent on the owner and the owner passes away, the value of that business will immediately start to drop until it perhaps may go to zero because it's worth nothing. And so really take the time to think about and prepare for not only the business side, but now we're talking more about the personal side. So let's kind of bring this back into some business conversation. Your late husband was a small business owner. What did you learn from your experience after he passed away?
Well, it's a sad story, because Carl was an incredibly successful litigator here in San Antonio and Bexar County. He loved trial law, and he loved being a lawyer. He loved what he did for his vocation. But when he got
was he in a like an independent firm then?
He had his
so
own.
there's a great example of, the litigator dies, the value of his practices goes to almost nothing.
It does. And I will tell you that he had two partners, friends, that officed with him. They were not partners in the business. They officed with him. They helped him on cases. They collaborated. And the minute they found out that Carl was passing away and was sick, let's just say sick, when Carl's diagnosis first came out, one, they were calling people and telling them. So they were violating HIPAA, violating a friendship. Two, they were calling clients and telling him that he was sick. So then clients were calling into the paralegal, and the paralegal was saying, I don't know what you're talking about, because we hadn't shared anything with her. Hours within, the day before my husband died, he was calling them because there was something I think he really wanted to tell them. They were not retaking his phone calls. And then after he died, one of his partners, or one of his office mates, friend, I don't even know if I call him a friend, was charging a deposition on his credit card. And the deposition company just called back in and said, hey, are we supposed to be doing this? And mind you, my husband died on a Sunday. This is a Monday morning. So he knew that Carl had passed away. He was charging on his credit cards. He used his LexisNexis for up to 90 days without me knowing, because I didn't know where any of the bills were. They were signing up clients at local coffee shops. They were going to clients, calling them and saying Carl had passed away. There were all these things that were going on. And I don't mean to talk badly about them, because as my husband would say, the facts are the truth, if they're the true facts. And as a widow, I was sitting back. I'm not a lawyer. I was having to step in and say, who do I go to? So I had to find a really young attorney. It was a friend of the family that my husband had said, just call him. He'll know what to do. He was a young attorney, and he came in, and we got letters out to clients, and we found out quickly that $300,000 in judgments and fees that were owed to my husband, clients don't have to pay. That goes through probate. And the job of the executor is to collect. And I didn't realize that was my job, because the probate attorneys never told me that, hey, you need to find a collection company or yourself to start collecting on these fees. So one of the biggest mistakes I made was shutting down my husband's malpractice insurance, because he had a lawsuit that was filed against him after he died. And the first question they asked was, where's his malpractice insurance? And I was like, it was a fire sale. I shut everything down. So, when going back to like the business side of this, I will tell any business owner, have a conversation, have your insurances in place, have a conversation with your wife. If she's not part of the business, have it with somebody that's going to come in and help you. There are a lot of business consultants like yourself that could be hired to come in the event that there's a sickness due to COVID and they can't be there to run their business, a disability that takes them out of the business, or if they pass away unexpectedly, or they get cancer like my husband and die really quick, that there's somebody there to guide your spouse and your family through that process. My son was not an attorney. My daughter was not an attorney. He had 2 older children, not attorneys. We relied on friends to help us. And, friends are there to grieve with you. They're not necessarily good business advisors. And so I made a lot of financial mistakes. And that is why I do what I do, because I want to walk people through, get prepared. I know you don't want to think about it. Nobody wants to think about dying, but what's worse than you building your business up, having a very successful business over your lifetime, and then you passing away, and who you think are your friends or your business partners don't treat your wife and your family fairly. They take advantage of that vulnerability in that time frame. So have those conversations, but get prepared. And for families that it's too late, it's not too late, because there are people like you that they can call me and I can say, hey, I know Tom, I know other people that are business coaches that can step in, that have that financial conscious to walk you through what to do first. It's a lot of hard work, but you have to have the conversations.
You must have a bird in your office, do you?
They're chirping outside. They're so happy.
Oh, they're chirping outside. Wow, that's from outside. That's amazing. So, boy, thin windows in San Antonio, I think. So there's no need for double windows down there.
Maybe this hasn't driven by yet.
That's right. So who would have thought, right? I mean, boy, these are some really, really devastating lessons for you to learn. Shutting down the malpractice. Who would have thought shutting down the malpractice, and then there was a malpractice suit against him posthumously? Who would have ever thought of those things? And so you're right. I mean, there's just nowhere to turn. It's sort of like what we do with businesses. Where do you turn when you want to prepare your business for a transition? There are very few resources out there, and so I am so thankful that our paths have crossed, so that you could use this platform as almost a warning for business owners to be thinking about these kinds of things. These are the things that get kicked down the street to your heirs. Imagine, if you will, and I don't want to dredge up any past feelings. I know it's been a long time since your husband passed, but imagine if he knew this stuff before he passed away, that you were going to be going through this. What do you think he would have done about these things?
I think we would have had more meaningful conversations. And I think that he would have put into a playbook. He would have had more of a playbook ready. He would have said, this is who you go to, this is what you do. I think that in his mind of minds, we were married for 26 years. We grew up together. I always say that because he was 20 years older than me. So when I met him, I was 20 and he was 40, but we were married for 20.
You made him grow up.
But he was, I think he always thought, Esther, you're going to be able to figure this out. You can do this. You're a smart woman, you're educated. And I don't think he realized that the people that he thought were his friends were going to react. And I kind of, in their defense, if there is a defense, I think they were so freaked out by how fast he got sick and how quick he died, that they just reacted in the way that they did, and I look back on it now and I think I remember having to I don't think I grieved my husband for the whole 4 years. And after he died, I think I waited till the probate court said, okay, the 4 years is up. And I finally was able to put some completeness around that time frame, because his business had things coming up consistently for 4 years, people filing claims in probate court against the business, and me trying to figure out, like, when do you have to hold on to his legal stuff for 7 years? Who tells you that, I call the San Antonio Bar Association. They're like, Marge Churchill, I'll never forget her name. She was like, you have to scan and save those files for 7 years. And if somebody wants their original file, you have to give it to them, even if they don't pay you. There were so many things that I learned through this process that I think that it was painful, but through this, I'm able to, even though it's been 7 years since Carl passed away, I'm able to really sit down with a business owner and say, I know this hurts and I know it stinks, but we're going to have to put this together, because you don't want your wife. And more importantly, I love when business owners say, my financial advisor has got everything under control. I'm like, do you trust your financial advisor? Like, do you really trust him with your wife? Have you sat in a room and watched your wife and your financial advisor have a conversation without you being part of it? Because that relationship after you die is very important, because that's who's helping your wife manage your portfolio and your business. So, there's a lot of important questions that we walk through. And, like everything else, I kept asking the universe as I was going through all these hard lessons, why is this happening to me? What are you trying to teach me? And that's why I started LOLA, not just for individuals and families, business owners, corporations. I mean, there was so much to learn through this whole process.
That is some solid advice, to have the financial advisor to be meeting with both spouses, right? And we typically think of perhaps a male spouse, maybe a domineering male who has those financial conversations, and the female doesn't. But it can go either way. Could be the woman who handles all of the finances in the family, the way my mom did. My mom handled all of the finances in my parents' lives, and my dad, fortunately, I guess, predeceased her, so she had a handle on everything. If she had died first, it would have been a disaster for him. I remember he couldn't even go to the bank and cash a check because they didn't believe it was his signature when he signed it right in front of them, right?
Wow.
And so because they were so used to seeing my mom's hand on everything. And so I think that is huge. And I recently heard from a financial advisor that it is very common, once a spouse passes away, that the surviving spouse changes financial advisors because the financial advisor is not handling the spouse in a way that they should be handled. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
I can draw a little bit of experience here. So my financial advisor ended up being my dad's financial advisor. And my dad, when he passed away, was 82, like 82, 83 years old. So his advisor was giving him kind of like here and now, not having to go the long haul, for advice. And whereas when it came to me, I was 46, and having to give me advice of 20 plus years, it was just a different relationship. Like the way he talked to my father was very different than the way he talked to me. And I ended up, I have moved financial advisors 3 different times in 7 years, and I know that sounds crazy and people might think, wow, you're losing a percentage every time you do that. But I feel like there's a season. And for sometimes there are times as I've grown in my business, I've grown in my confidence, and I've learned more and what I'm expecting. And some advisors are used to talking to people and at people. They're not used to saying, hey, what are your questions? I did not know where my investments were. I didn't know what kind of vehicles they were in. Nobody was sitting down and educating me. And I know that sounds like I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything. I'm a woman who was taking care of my family, and I probably should have known better and more about investments, but I just felt like I didn't need to know. And then when my husband died, I was like, I need to know. And the advisor was like, what do you mean you need to know? I mean, you're educated. You should be able to get this. And so it really has taken me some time to find an advisor that I can communicate with effectively and who can listen to me and hear my fears. Because I think that is the number one thing for women, that when their husband dies, especially if they've had businesses, they feel very, very scared about the future, about money. And you have to have a person, your advisor has to be that person to sit down with them and say, you don't need to be scared. We can walk through this together. Let's look at what your income is. Let's look at what your expenses are. Just very basic things, but having that meaningful conversation. So I can tell you that financial advisors, when I meet with them, I'm really looking more for personality to help me with my clients than I am anything else.
Yep, I agree. I'm always looking for that personality fit, right? Financial advisor, getting financial advice is an intensely personal thing. And so I actually have 4 financial advisors, and I make certain that they are in regular contact with both of us. So because if something happens to me, I want my wife to be well taken care of, because unlike my parents, I handle most of the financial decisions in this house. And you're actually pointing up some things to me that I need to go, okay, I need to work on my playbook as well. Well, I know you work kind of post grief, but how do you work with business owners and their organizations in crisis in general?
Well, so twofold with business owners that want to get prepared like you. I'm pretty much a consultant, but I call myself more of a quarterback. So I'm the person that goes in and meets with the business owner and says, tell me about your business. Tell me how many employees you have. Tell me where, if there's any vulnerable positions that you have. But, sitting down with them and saying where and who is your team, that in the event something happens to you, if you become disabled or sick, who is that team? Have you communicated with them? And where is all that information? And then if you die, what is your plan? And then if they say, well, I don't really know, then I guide them and I'm quarterbacking them to professionals to get them into the right hands, to have the right people helping them. With business owners, I work with them on leadership webinars to walk their teams through what to look for when somebody is going down that slippery slope of having to put mom or dad into a nursing home, or there's a cancer diagnosis, or there's a major diagnosis and they're trying to come to work, but they're having presenteeism, which is they're showing up, but they're not really at work working. So working through
presenteeism. Okay. That's a new word for me. Okay.
So working with them because they're there, but they're Googling and they're worried about their mom. They're worried about,
I totally get it. Absolutely.
Yeah, they're there, but they're not there. But yeah, so I work with leadership team on webinars for employers to help them say what to say, when to say it, how to have that conversation. And we step in and we do a lot of triage for small businesses where the employer doesn't really have an HR team. They don't really want to know too much, but they're saying, hey, if I pay for 5 hours of your time, can you help me help the employee figure out how to help them? So is it making phone calls? Sometimes I find out that maybe an employee is going through a really bad divorce and it's a different type of loss, right? But it's affecting the bottom line for the employer because they're a small business. They're like, I need that employee to be present. So sitting down with us, we're able to identify where the fears are, where the help needs to be, picked up for them. And we make phone calls and set appointments and just those little things, taking it off an employer and an employee's stack of to-dos. We're able to get that employee back to work in their not presenteeism, get them into actively being a present employee so that the employer can know that they've got them there versus their brain is halfway at home and, the nursing home or the hospital but coaching those employers through those conversations and how to help them.
The older we get, the more likely we're going to have to deal with these things. As I tell folks, and I say this tongue in cheek, and I hope it doesn't sound terrible. My parents did us the favor of dying while they were young, so we didn't have to deal with kind of that end of life stuff. Although my dad had cancer for many, many years before he died, but when you're dealing with older parents, it as my wife is now, right? Dealing with her parents and trying to make decision. They still live in their home. Are they should they be looking for a place? It is an enormous distraction
Mhm.
to you if you're trying to get work done, right? Because
Yeah,
that
that's
is
presenteeism.
always on your mind, right?
Yeah, that is the presenteeism of coming to work. And sometimes people are at home on the weekends and they're so busy taking care of their family and their parents and making sure things are done that they go to work to get work done, which is part of getting work done is getting some of the phone calls made to doctors' offices and appointments. And a lot of times employers can see it coming. They see it happening and they're like, how do I talk to them about this? How do I have a conversation? And so we actually can come in 5 hours, pretty much not band-aid it, but try to get in there and say, okay, you're going to need this professional or this professional, or you're going to need them to do this, or we can take this much off of their plate so that they're there and they don't have to make those phone calls. We can narrow it down for them on a place for mom or dad, getting with those professionals, going and looking at the facilities, just like we walk a cemetery for a family, we can go walk, nursing homes and put videotapes and getting in there and smelling it and saying, oh no, from 1, 2, or 3, what you're thinking, the pictures look great, but maybe the staff isn't that great, or they don't have 100% staff. So we can do all those digging questions. But for a business owner, what better way to buy into your employees than to be there for them in the most vulnerable of times? I love when people say we're the best place to work. And I'm like, the best place to work is when there is a tragedy and there is a true crisis. If that is when the best place to work comes into place. Who is, as an employer, you bringing in to help your employees meet their grief?
That is a great question. So I hope that many of the business owners listening today will reach out to you. We'll give them your contact information in just a minute. But I hope that they will reach out to you, because as I think about it, I wish I'd known that of course, you hadn't really established this business before I sold my last large company. But this would have been a wonderful benefit to try and provide to my employees who were dealing with these various types of crises in their life. Look, I'm not completely altruistic. I like to help people, but I know it would also help my business, because if it could help the employees focus and be more productive, it will help them to get back on the job and bring more value to the business. So there is a non-altruistic side to my thinking as well. So any advice that you would like to give to business owners that are listening to this podcast?
Yeah, I don't mean to scare you. This is my own personal experience. I always try to tell people, Esther's in the house, the Debbie Downers here. You know what? I think the most gifted thing that you can give, to anybody is your time. And as a business owner, we know we fight really hard to have our own time and to share with our families and to, enjoy the fruits of our labors, right? We work hard and we get to play hard, but sitting down with your family and having a meaningful conversation about where the paperwork is, what your intentions are, what, if anything were to happen to me, this, A, B, C, and nobody wants to talk about it. But if you were to do that, that is the greatest gift you can give a family. And you may have 3 kids that totally disagree with you and having this conversation. But when you have it, it's done, it's out, it's in the universe. And when and if, because we all have an expiration date, go to your refrigerator, look at your yogurt, pull it out. I bet you it's expired. Everybody has an expiration date. As a business owner, it's not when, it's really if and when, right? So have the conversations, even and have it with your family, and then have it with your team. And if you're like me, I don't have a really high level team. My family in my business is my team. It's a family owned business. Have the conversations, make sure that you're saying, hey, if this happens to me, this is what I want to do. And you'd be surprised. One of my kids is in my business with me. The other one says, you know what, if something happens to you, I'd be just as happy if we could sell it. So very honest conversations. And at that point I thought, wow, you're willing to sell what, what I've worked real hard for. But when you find that out, then you know what you're dealing with. So from that to one business owner to the other, have the hard conversation.
I really do appreciate that. It's having those kind of conversations because so many times I see businesses where the children and the patriarch or the matriarch don't have those conversations, and their vision for the future is not well aligned. And so I think that those are very, very important things. I wanted to mention here that we do have a few tools available, free tools available for business owners who are thinking about this. I happen to be a member of Vistage. I mentioned that at the beginning of this podcast. And there's a green box exercise that'll kind of point you in the direction of a few things that you should think about. But I don't want that to replace having a conversation with Esther and her team over at Loss of Life Advocates. So this podcast is all about maximizing business value. Esther, you're a business owner. So what's the one most important thing you recommend business owners do to build value in their businesses?
Make sure you have all of your legal documents prepared. That is the most important thing, because at the end of the day, if there is nothing there legal to protect your trademarks of your company, your legal contracts, all those things that your attorneys prepare for you, that is the number one thing as a business owner you can have in place for your family and for your business.
Ironically, that's one of the first questions we ask when we engage with a business owner. Are all of your documents legal, and are they all prepared and up to date? Right? It's so important. I hear horror story after horror story of, we started this business 26 years ago, but then we never updated the buy, sell, or anything like that. So, get those things. That is great advice for business owners. But I can't let you get away without asking you our bonus question. You've been very vulnerable with us today and talking about a lot of things. I want to ask you to be vulnerable one more time, Esther. And so I ask this question to everybody. So I'm not just picking on you. What personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years?
Oh, as my dad would say, I talk more than I listen. So I really have to work hard at listening and not talking, holding back. But, your words will get you in trouble.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes. I sometimes react very quickly. I have a little bit of that myself. So, well, for those of my close friends that are listening, they're just laughing right now, going, well, a little bit of that, right? So, how can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you?
You can find me at my website to learn more about my company at lossoflifeadvocates.com. So that's www.lossoflifeadvocates.com. You can also contact me at info@lossoflifeadvocates.com. That's my email. And then also in San Antonio or, Texas, anywhere, we're all local now, right? So 210-802-2224, and I receive text and phone calls on that number. So if you're too busy to pick up the phone and have a conversation, shoot me a text. I get them, and we have our team in place to make sure that we don't miss your calls. But thanks for letting me be here with you today. It's a great way to start my week. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. I hope it's a good way for our listeners to start their week as well. Now, just to want to be clear here, you don't just work in the San Antonio or Texas area. You'll work anywhere, correct?
Yes. As a matter of fact, our mutual friend, Reed Rasmussen, actually hired me to help a friend of his in Seattle, Washington. So just to give our listeners just a little bit of a tidbit, I've done property and casualty, children that have died in house fires. I've worked with families to represent them with their claims, making sure that everything is handled from A to Z, being their family spokesperson all the way down to filing their claims for the inventory of their homes. That was in Anacortes, Washington. Then, of course, Reed's family friend in Seattle. We have clients in Connecticut, San Diego. I'm kind of crossing back and forth in my brain, but we are a virtual company. And if COVID did anything, it made us really realize that we can help people in all corners of the world.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing of using the technology now, right? We can sit face to face and have that conversation. So thank you, Esther. You have been a wonderful guest. Thanks for being on our show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You can find Esther Pipoly at lossoflifeadvocates.com or on LinkedIn, or of course, you can always reach out to me and I would be happy to make a warm introduction. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your businesses. Tune in each week and follow us wherever you found this podcast. Be sure to add your comments. We love your comments, and we will respond to every one of them. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to prepare for the unthinkable while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.